Guys, welcome to my channel. We are reading Monster High, Monster Rescue, Go Get Lagoona. Today we are actually reading 3 chapters. Today we're going to read chapter 7, 8, and 9. Do you like my nails, guys? But yeah, we're going to just start reading. And yeah, like I said, I'm just going to start reading. Chapter 7. The 4 ghouls worked on their projects late into the night. The next morning they woke up. They were up, bright and early, and ready for adventure. But first the good breakfast, Dracula told the ghouls as he served Dracula told the ghouls as he served them stacks of waffles and blueberries and syrup. I don't want you mapologicking all the world on the empty stomach. Thanks, Dad, Dracula said as she took a big bite. Are you sure you're all ready for your trip today? Dracula asked with an edge of anxiety in his voice. Is there anything else you need? Don't worry about us, Mr. D, Claudine replied confidently. We aren't just prepared, we're monstrally prepared. It was true. All the ghouls had packed waterproof bags with their canteens, snacks, and anything else they thought they might need on the trip. But that wasn't all. Dracula's eyes twinkled as she unzipped her bag. Ready for a little show and tell? She asked. First up, Frankie. The bolts in Frankie's neck lit up as she showed everyone the scuba gear she built. These masks are specifically designed for deep water. We might be under pressure but we sure won't feel it, she said. And check out these oxygen tanks. They're filled with super condensed form of oxygen. I pressurized in the lab. They barely weigh anything, but we'll be able to breathe for at least 20 hours underwater. Ghoul! That is clawsome, Claudine cheered. Cleo and I were busy yesterday too. Check it out. With a big flourish, Claudine and Cleo presented Frankie with her new wetsuit. The look on Frankie's face shifted from confusion to astonishment to enjoy. Is this what I think it is? She squealed. Head to toe, full waterproof and with reinforced waterproof seams, Cleo announced. Now you can come on the trip without worrying about short-circuiting. This is so voltacious, Frankie exclaimed. How can I thank you? Claudine waved her hand in the air like it was no big deal. No thanks necessary, she said. It's just what ghoul friends do for each other. Cleo turned to Claudine. Like, teach them how to sew and swim. All in one day, she said. Ghoul, you are totally golden. I mean it. And knowing smile across Claudine's face. I had something for you too, she said. I made this late last night. Hope you like it. Then Claudine surprised Cleo with a custom life vest, complete with gold sacred details that perfectly matched Cleo's outfit. You're a great swimmer for someone who has had only 1 day of lessons, Claudine continued. But when you're going to swim in the deep water, well, you can't be too careful. What do you think? I think, Cleo began, as a huge smile spread across her face. I think I love it. Girlfriend, you are so brave, Dracula exclaimed. 1 day of swimming lessons and you're ready to dive into the deep water of Great Barrier Reef. That is truly fantastic, Cleo shrugged off the compliment, but everyone could tell she was pleased. What is there to be afraid of when the ghoul friends have my back? She asked. Nothing. Not even giant sharks, teased Frankie. Just remember they attack only when they feel anxious or scared. So, if we see one, we'll just sing a lullaby, Claudine joked. making everyone laugh. Teach it how to meditate. If that's what it takes, then yes, Draculaura continued. I'm going to put on my wetsuit, Frankie announced. Be right back. While they waited for Frankie, Claudine helped Cleo try on her new life vest, which fit perfectly. Then the ghouls put on their scuba gear that Frankie had invented. This suit is spooktacular, Frankie announced. Then she rejoined the group. Thank you so much. Draculaura looked at her ghoul friends and marveled at how far they all come. Just days ago, they'd been struggling with their first adventure in the harsh desert of Egypt, Cleo's homeland, and now they look ready for anything that could happen on the deep sea dive. So, what do you think, ghouls? Are we ready, or are we ready? Draculaura asked with excitement. Ready! Everyone cheered at the same time. Wait, Dracula said. The ghoul all turned and looked at him. Don't forget extra sunscreen, he announced as he passed out 4 tubes, one for each ghoul. How could we forget that? Draculaura said with a grin. She gave her dad a quick hug, then pulled out the skullet. Her ghoul friends reached over to place their fingers on it. Draculaura took a deep breath. Lagoona exo monstrum, she said in a loud, clear voice. Whoosh! Draculaura was getting used to the way the mapalog transported her to the completely different location. Sorry, guys. Well, almost used to it. Her fingers never left the skullet. She thought she could feel her ghoul friends holding on tightly too, and that made her feel a lot less alone, even though she couldn't see anything until splash, 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 splash. One by one, the ghouls fell into the crystal clear waters of the Great Barrier Reef. Draculaura shut her eyes by instinct, but just as quickly as she realized that she didn't need to. Frankie's scuba mask would protect them from the stinging salt water. She opened her eyes just in time to see million bubbles zipping up to the surface of the water. Draculaura used her hands to part them like a curtain, and for the very first time she saw the Great Barrier Reef close. It was astonishing that Draculaura could do nothing but stare in amusement. Underwater, Draculaura could clearly see the acacia coral structures, some that ruffled edges, others that were lacy and delicate, and even more of prudent from the ocean floor, like torrents on a castle. Thin blades of seagrass swaying back and forth from the ocean currents as thousands of fish in all colors darted through the reef. A large jellyfish, nearly translucent, whooshed through the water, trailing tentacles behind like ribbons. Draculaura could have stayed there watching the beautiful sea creatures for hours. Then she remembered to look around for her ghoul friends. She couldn't see them anywhere, but she had a feeling they weren't far away. Kicking in her feet, Draculaura propelled herself to the surface of the water. Unlike her first trip of the Great Barrier Reef, there was no dazing sun to greet her. The gray clouds made a sky feel heavy, as if it were pressing down on her, but at least it was easier to see without the blinding sparkle of the sun on the water. She spotted Claudine, Cleo, and Frankie a few feet away and swam to join them. Ghoul, what took you so long? Claudine teased. It's truly fantastic down here, Draculaura exclaimed. There are so many bright colors and funny little fishes. I've never seen anything like that. The Great Barrier Reef is well known for its natural beauty, Frankie said. That's why it's such a major tourist destination for normies. We could keep an eye out for them, actually. Definitely, Claudine agreed. I don't think we're quite ready for that, and I don't think they are either, added Draculaura. Can you believe this ocean? Cleo marveled. I didn't even know there was this much water in the whole world. It's so much bigger than I had imagined, added Frankie. I mean, I knew it would be a massive, but nothing could have prepared me. Seriously, Draculaura agreed. I read an entire book on the Great Barrier Reef, and I'm still overwhelmed. Where do we even begin? The ghouls were quiet for a moment while they thought about it. Hey, I hate to bring up bad news, Frankie began, as she pointed at the sky. But did you ghouls notice that Draculaura started up in the distance and clouds looked darker, meaning an even? Those clouds weren't here yesterday, said Claudine. We saw a couple of clouds maybe, but nothing like this. They might not get any closer, Cleo suggested. Not that I know anything about ocean storms, obviously, but sometimes in the desert we'd see faraway sandstorms. We'd never get anywhere near our tombs. Let's hope that happens for us, Frankie said, because I do not like the look of those clouds. I can feel. What is it? Draculaura asked when Frankie stopped abruptly. It's probably nothing, Frankie answered, but sometimes my bolts get all tingly when there is going to be an electric storm. And you ghouls do not want to be in the water for lightning strikes. We'd better move fast, then Draculaura replied. A damp breeze had kicked up. She couldn't be completely sure, but it looked as if the dark clouds were moving closer. Move where exactly? Asked Cleo. All I see is water. No coastline, no island, and not a single monster we could ask for help. No normies either, Claudine added. Draculaura pointed into the depth of the water. I was underwater over there, she said. The reefs were amazing and filled with sea creatures. Maybe Lagoona is down there with them. We are down under, after all. Let's take a look, Frankie explained as she paddled over to Draculaura. Ghouls, I'll stay at the surface, Cleo offered. I could dive underwater with my life vest, and this way I can keep an eye out on that storm. Fantastic idea, Draculaura told her. You can single us if there's trouble, from storm or from shark. You got it, Cleo replied. The ghouls adjusted their scuba masks and checked their oxygen tanks before they plugged underwater. Draculaura swam in the direction of the coral reef, while Claudine and Frankie followed close behind her. Soon Drac saw the dramatic spiral of corals twisting up from the sandy ocean floor. But there was a big difference from when she'd been underwater just minutes ago. Now there wasn't a single sea creature in sight. That's weird, Draculaura thought. Where did they all go, and why? Then she recalled something she read in the Wonders of Down Under. Coral reefs were especially popular with smaller sea creatures because they offered so many hidden, hard-to-see areas. Maybe they didn't disappear, Draculaura thought. Maybe they were just hiding in plain sight. But unless the sea creature swam out to greet her, Draculaura didn't know how she'd find one. But coral reefs were as delicate as they were beautiful. She didn't dare risk damaging their fragile structures by swimming too close. Just then Draculaura felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned around to see Claudine and Frankie behind her. Even through their scuba masks, Draculaura could see the confused expressions on their face. She shrugged and showed them that she didn't know where all the fish and beasties had gone either. Then Draculaura beckoned for the ghouls to follow as she swam to a different section of the reef. This spot was eerie, quite too. The only motion came from the thin strands of seagrass that swayed back and forth with the currents. This isn't right, Draculaura said. The books all say that coral reefs are filled with life. A new worry started and gnawed at Draculaura. Had something happened to all the creatures who made their homes in the coral reef? And if so, had it happened to Lagoona too? Draculaura felt another tap on her shoulder. She turned around and saw Frankie pointing at the surface. She understood perfectly. It was time to regroup and figure out what was going on. Chapter 8. The first thing Draculaura heard when she popped her head above the water was a scream. It was Cleo. She was waving wildly in the water, farthering away from Draculaura. Remembered either Cleo drifted away or we did. Draculaura thought as she started swimming as fast as she could. Cleo screamed again. Claudine was the fastest swimmer of all the ghouls. She blitzed past Frankie and Draculaura as she swam directly to Cleo, a blur zooming through the choppy water. "What's wrong?" Claudine shouted Cleo. Draculaura could just barely hear her voice. Carried on the whim. "I've been calling and calling for you ghouls," Cleo cried, clearly upset. "Why did you swim so far?" "Sorry," Draculaura apologized. "We didn't mean to. I think the current carried us away. The water's getting rougher." Frankie put her arm around Cleo's shoulder and gave her a squeeze. "We would never leave you, ghoul," she said. "I know," Cleo said, "but that's not what I was worried about." She stretched out her arm and pointed to the horizon. "The shark is back." Draculaura's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the water. At first she didn't see anything. "It's okay, ghouls," she began. "It's probably gone by now. Remember, sharks don't want to eat monsters." And then Draculaura saw it, a dark seek shape slicing through the water, the arched point fin skimming through the wave. Told everyone that Cleo was right. "Come on, ghouls," Claudine said urgently. "We're about to be shark bait." "It's swimming right at us," added Frankie. Draculaura frowned. Something didn't seem quite right. "Wait a minute," she began. "Drac, let's go," Frankie urged her. Draculaura narrowed her eyes as she squinted, trying to get a better look. "Draculaura, please," Cleo cried. The creature was still swimming towards them. It came closer and closer until Draculaura spun around in the water to face her ghoul friends. "It's not a shark," she exclaimed in relief. "It's a dolphin." "Huh?" asked Cleo. "How can you be so sure?" Frankie said. "I read all about them in the wonders of Down Under." Draculaura said excitedly. "See the fin? It would be much farther back on a shark. Plus, it would stand straight up, not curve backwards." "I've never seen a dolphin before," Claudine said. "Look at how it leaps over the waves. Dolphins are playful creatures," Draculaura told the other ghouls. "But what?" asked Cleo. "I'm not sure," Draculaura admitted. "Something seems off, but I'm not sure what." "Uh-oh," Frankie said. "Maybe it's a shark after all." "Okay, now that I've seen it closer, I'm even more convinced it's a dolphin," Draculaura said. "But it doesn't seem like it's having fun. Seems like a kind of stress." "How can you tell?" asked Claudine. "It's swimming so fast," Draculaura replied, "like it's trying to escape or something." "Escape from what?" Frankie said. "I don't know," Drac said. "But did you notice how it keeps slapping the water with its tail? It seems upset." "Yeah," Cleo said slowly. "Seems to." Draculaura shivered even though the water still felt warm. "Must be that cool breeze," she thought. Then the sudden flapping movement near her face caught her eye. It wasn't a bird, though. It was... Draculaura lunged and grabbed on a piece of damp, wrinkled paper. "Ghouls," she cried. "What's this?" "Trash, probably," Claudine said with a frown. "Some normies are totally litter bugs." It's a poster or something," Draculaura explained. She read this sign aloud. "Warning! Tropical cyclone approaching. Avoid the ocean until further notice." And there was a small wave symbol at the bottom of the page. "Where have I seen the symbol before?" Draculaura wondered. "Does this look familiar to you, ghouls?" she asked, tapping the symbol on her finger. The ghouls stared at the sign for a long moment. "I know," Cleo said. "Wasn't there a symbol like that in Lagoona's email?" "Maybe," Draculaura said, getting more excited by a minute. "What if Lagoona made this sign and posted it to warn normies about the tropical cyclone?" "What is a tropical cyclone anyways?" Cleo asked. "I've never heard of that before." "They're rare, but they can be dangerous," Frankie replied, shouting over the brewing storm. The wind through was so strong, and the other ghouls heard only one word, dangerous. "Do you think that could be why the dolphin was acting strange?" asked Draculaura. But before the other ghouls could answer, Claudine suddenly yelled out, "I see it!" She pointed at the horizon, where the tall and on a mossy funnel cloud seems to materialize from the depth of the ocean. It was swirling faster and faster, zooming across the wave. The winds were even stronger now, whipping the ghoul's wet hair across the scuba masks and making it hard to see. Now the ocean is not my specialty, but I'd say this looks bad, Cleo said urgently. Very, very bad. I agree, Dracula replied. Let's get out of here. Where are we going? Frankie asked. Back to Monster High, Dracula said firmly. It's the only way. We'll wait out the storm, and hopefully when we come back, the cyclone will be gone. Maybe we can find the dolphin again, or someone else who can tell us about Lagoona. Dracula reached into the secret pocket of her wetsuit and pulled out the skullet. She held it out for her ghoul friends to grab hold of, but the wind yanked it from her fingers. It fell into the sea with a splash. No! Dracula cried. Without even bothering to adjust her scuba mask, she dove after the skullet. It was hard to see now. The strong tide was picking up broken bits of the shell and tiny grains of sand, swirling them through, so that the water appeared thick and murky. Luckily, though, the skullet jilted and caught Dracula's eye. Dracula grabbed it and clenched it with her fist. Then she surfaced and took a deep breath, filling her lungs with air. Ghoul, I got it, she cried. But in the short time she'd been underwater, the tide had carried her friends even farther away. The cyclone was still approaching, and it was moving fast. Dracula knew two things for certain. She had to get to her ghoul friends, and they all had to get out of there. Chapter 9. Swim closer! Frankie's voice echoed faintly over the crashing of the waves. Dracula used every last ounce of her energy and every bit of her strength to swim through the current waters. The cyclone picked up strength and speed as it tore across the surface of the ocean. But the same current that was making it so hard for Dracula to swim was pulling her friends even further out to sea. Fight the current! She screamed. The fierce wind seemed to pull the words from her mouth and throw them away. There was no indication that the other ghouls had heard her, or even see as her white-capped wave rose higher and higher. Dracula's arms and legs ached from the effort of swimming in such a rough sea, but she wasn't about to give up. She reached down deep for one last burst of energy, and that inspired a new idea. Swim under the waves, she thought suddenly. Don't fight against them. Go under them. Why hadn't it occurred to her before? Well, it would be scary for starters. The water was rough beneath the surface, too. They're murky enough that it would be hard for Dracula to see where she was swimming. She would also run the risk of losing sight of her ghoul friends. Altogether, a thought so scary, Dracula had to push it from her mind. After all, she could just as easily lose them in a cyclone got to them before she did. On my way, Dracula thought with determination. She had to try after all. It was the only thing she could do. Dracula checked her oxygen tank, took a deep breath, and plunged underwater. Her muscles burned, but that didn't stop her from pulling herself through the cloudy, churning ocean. Dracula kicked and kicked and kicked until finally she had to surface. She had to know where she was, where the tropical cyclone was, where her ghoul friends were. Dracula! The sound of Cleo's voice filled her ears before Dracula had a chance to wipe the water off her mask. It was enough in the moment to hear the ghoul friend's voice. If nothing else, it told Dracula that she was close enough to hear Cleo over the whipping wind. Dracula opened her mouth to call back, but the huge wave surprised her, crashing over her head and filling her mouth with salt water. Dragged beneath the waves, Dracula struggled to pull herself back to the surface. She finally rose above the water, still spluttering and trying to catch her breath. She glanced around and saw that Cleo was just a few feet away. Cleo, I'm coming, Dracula said. It was so hard to swim those last few feet, but somehow Dracula managed to do it. She hated to admit it, but she was exhausted, just as the swirling ocean demanded more and more from her. Cleo seemed to understand. "Hold on to my arm," she said. "My life vest can help us both afloat." "Where are Frankie and Claudine?" Draculaura finally managed to ask. Cleo pointed. Draculaura looked in that direction and saw her ghoul friends bobbing together in the rough water. They tried to dive beneath one of those big waves, but the undercurrent dragged them that way. Cleo exclaimed. "I've been trying to swim towards them, but they're just getting farther and farther away. That's because the current is pulling them towards a tropical cyclone," Draculaura said grimly. "We've got to get out of here before it gets worse." "And it looks like it's about to get a lot worse," Cleo said anxiously. The tropical cyclone was bearing down on them fast. Draculaura was worried too. If they didn't reach Frankie and Claudine soon— "Stop," Draculaura told herself. "Don't even think it." "Let's go," Draculaura urged Cleo. "Kick, kick, kick as hard as you can." With both ghouls kicking in the rhythm, they were finally able to propel themselves through the rough waters. 20 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet to go. Frankie, Claudine, and Cleo screamed, trying to get to be heard over the roaring water of howling wind. 7 feet. "We are almost there," Draculaura cried. "The skullet," Frankie yelled back. 5 feet. "I got it," Drac replied. 3 feet. They were close enough now that Draculaura and Cleo could reach out far to grab a hold of Claudine and Frankie. But first, Draculaura had to get the skullet. She wanted to be ready to transport out there in the instant all four ghouls could touch it. Another enormous wave swirled, crashed over the ghoul friends. Draculaura pressed her clenched fist with the skullet, tucked inside it against her heart. She would do anything to protect the skullet. Luckily, Cleo kept a tight hold on Drac's other arm to keep her from being carried away with the wave. But now the gap had opened up again. Draculaura and Cleo had to swim another 15 feet to reach their ghouls. "How much longer can this go on?" Draculaura thought. She tried to muster her strength. She remembered all the obstacles she had already faced, all the struggles on the way to starting Monster High, and knew she would never, ever give up, no matter what. Kick, 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 Draculaura thought again, and again, and again, until finally she and Cleo were close enough to grab onto Claudine and Frankie's arms. The four ghouls held one another as tightly as they could, and Draculaura knew that they wouldn't ever let go, not for anything. Overhead the sky crackled, blinding bolts of lightning leaping from cloud to cloud. It was only in the matter of time, Draculaura knew, before one of them hit the water, but we'll be long gone before that happens, she pleaded. With the skullet still clenched to her fist, Draculaura held out her hand. She gingerly opened her fingers so that the other ghouls could grab onto the skullet too. The massive funnel cloud was so close, but all Draculaura had to do was say the words, "Monster High, Esco!" Whoosh! But it wasn't the monster mapalog that plunged the ghouls from the raging waters. It was the tropical cyclone. The funnel cloud sucked them up, whirling the ghouls in the endless spin as they traveled across the ocean. Draculaura slammed her eyes shut and tried to hold on as tight as she could. But she was no match for the furiously storm. None of them were. And then in Chapter 10, we will read that in the next video. I will post that in a couple days. Thank you guys for listening.